Hey gang, East Coast Lumberjack. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please hit the subscribe button, thumbs up, and you'll get these videos as soon as I post them. So today's the day. We're answering the age-old question, what causes a chain to cut crooked? And if you've run a chainsaw for any length of time at all, you probably know that when something's not right, you cannot make a straight cut. It drives the old East Coast Lumberjack bananas. Anyhow, we've talked a lot about that, and today we're going to do it all. I've actually taken the time to buy some chains and sharpen them up for you. So I want to talk a little bit first of all about a chainsaw tooth, so we understand what's going on. Because there's two things that can vary, but one affects the other. Okay, so this is a chainsaw tooth. Okay, this is the depth gauge, or what other guys that have been around a long time used to call them the rakers, but that's the depth gauge, and it gauges the depth. How much wood is going to hit this tooth? How much wood is it going to cut? Okay, this is the gullet, this is where the wood falls, this is the tooth. And of course, I've talked to you before about the working corner, and if the working corner isn't sharp, the rest of it, you can make it as shiny as you want everywhere else. If the working corner isn't sharp, that's the first piece of metal that touches the wood and cuts. So that's got to be sharp in order for your chain to be sharp. Now, what I want you to notice about this chainsaw tooth, all chainsaw teeth are the same, they're sloped backwards, which means as you file, every time you file this chain, this tooth gets a little bit shorter, which means the gap between your depth gauge and the tooth gets a little bit smaller. Now, typically they're set between 25 thousandths for hardwood and 35 thousandths for softwood. That's what you want your depth gauge set at. So every time you file, if you take 20 strokes off of it, you've lost, I don't know how many, 5-6 thousandths of an inch off your depth gauge. So what happens is, as you sharpen your tooth back and this tooth gets shorter, it actually gets lower, two things happen. It affects not only the length of the tooth, but it also affects the depth gauge height. So my prediction, we've always said, you know, maybe it's the length of the tooth, and it's sometimes if one side of your teeth are really long, the other side is really short, your chain cuts in a circle. And the reason for that, people think, is because the tooth is shorter, and the other side's longer, which is actually grabbing more wood. But it's actually the depth gauge height that's causing the problem. So theoretically, if you have a lot of teeth that are a lot shorter on one side, if you file their depth gauges down to be the same height as the teeth on the other side, even though they might be a lot longer, the chain should cut straight. Okay, so that's what we're going to test here today. Now, the old East Coast Lumberjack has been on a splurge. Valley Chainsaw, love seeing me coming up in Woodstock. So what we've done, I've purchased 6 chains, 6 brand spanking new Oregon chains. And I've sharpened the left-handed cutters on 3 chains, and I filed the right-handed cutters on the other 3 chains. So I've taken 40 strokes off the cutting teeth on the first one, on the left-handed cutters. So what that means is the depth gauge height is going to be a lot lower on the left-handed side. So the right-handed cutters that are still the same length they were, they're still the same height difference, 25 to 35 thousandths in the depth gauges, it should pull towards that side of the chain. Then the next chain I did, I lowered all the depth gauges. I left all the teeth the same length. So all the teeth on both sides are the same length, but the depth gauges are a lot lower on one side. And that side should also pull the chain. So we should see the same slope or circle in that chain because the depth gauges are lower, even though the teeth are all the same length. The last one, I filed all the teeth down, and then I also filed the depth gauges down as well. So even though one side of the teeth are really, 40 strokes shorter, the depth gauges are all the same height as the depth gauges on the other side of the chain. So we shouldn't see any difference in that, even though the teeth are a lot shorter. Okay, and then I've done the same thing for all the right-handed ones. Okay, so we've got these 6 chains, they're all brand spanking new, all filed up. And we also have a brand spanking new Echo, Timberwolf, okay, from Valley Chainsaw. It's brand spanking new, hasn't run a chain yet. The chain on it's brand spanking new, hasn't gone through any wood yet. So we're gonna go over, I'm gonna show you what I've got set up here. In order to test this and do it right, I've got a nice piece of hardwood here. Okay, and I've got straight lines drawn the whole way up and down. So it's solid hardwood, it's dry as a bone, so it's going to grab. And actually, it may jerk the chain right on my hand. I don't know. I haven't tried this yet. This is all, you're seeing it first time right here. No cuts, no nothing. That East Coast Lumberjack. So we're going to take those chains. The first one should cut nice and straight. It's the brand new chain on it. Then I'm going to put the one with the left-handed cutters all cut down 40 strokes. So that means the right-handed cutters on the right-hand side of the chainsaw they still have the depth gauges at the right height. It should pull to the right. We should see that. And we've got a measuring tape here. We can measure how much it pulled. And we should see the same thing for the right-handed cutters as we do with the left-handed cutters, because we've got chains sharpened both sides. So we're just about set to go here. What I'm going to do, I'll put on my hard hat with my ear protection. I'll fire up the chainsaw and we'll make the first cut down through here. We're gonna be changing out chains and bars quite a bit, but I'll take you with me so you don't have to watch just nothing. You can watch me change bars and chains over, or chains at least. Okay, so the first one's coming up. It's a brand new chain on a brand new chainsaw, an Echo 590 Timberwolf. It should cut straight down through here. So we're gonna watch that. Okay, so that's number one. And if we look at it, you can see here, it's gone straight down the line to the bottom. Here's all my lines right here. So it's done pretty well. Now, the wood is dry, so unfortunately, the ones that I've got the rakers cut down a long ways on is really going to grab. So it may really pull quite substantially for us. So, chain number one did exactly what we thought it would do. Brand new chain, rakers all the same height, and of course it cuts straight down through the wood. Now what we're going to do, we're going to take off. It's going to get a little fun after a bit when this saw warms up. We're going to take off this chain and put on our chain that has left-handed cutters, all filed down, 40 strokes. Let's make sure your chain breaks off. It's going to get a little hot after a bit, even though it's just one cut. Okay, so there's our first chain. Everything's perfect on it. Now, this one here, you can see it says right on it, 40 strokes off the left-handed cutters. So I want to show you it before I put it on. I'll put that in my pocket so it doesn't blow away. So as you can see here, the right-handed and left-handed cutters, these ones here are substantially shorter than these ones here. Okay, I've taken 40 strokes off the left-handed tooth. This one's still as long as it used to be. 40 strokes off this. This one's just like new. So I wouldn't say it's half as long, but it's probably a third as long. So I've lost a third of the tooth. So that means the depth gauge on my left-handed cutters is going to be really close to it, so it's not going to be biting a lot of wood. But the long right-handed cutters that are brand new on the other side, they still have that 25 or 35 thousandths, whatever it is, comes from the factory. That gap is still there, so it should pull to the right. That's what we're going to predict, because there's taking out more wood on the right-hand side of the chain. So we're going to put this on our brand new bar, put it on our brand new chainsaw. Nothing's bent or crooked, and we're going to see what happens. Okay, almost there. Guess you guys can't. I'll pull it down so you can see what the old guy's up to here. Give you something to watch, because most of this video is going to be pulling this cover off and on. So I got to put my tensioner, I got to loosen it just a little bit so it fits in that bar. There, and then we'll tighten it up again. So you always want to make sure your chains are properly tensioned. Put that on first. My bolt on so I don't lose it as I'm checking my tension. So it took a fair bit of time to file these chains down, which you probably wonder. I've been talking about doing this for a while, but I haven't. It's taken me a lot more time than I thought to get everything ready because I had to do a lot of filing. So between all the other stuff I do, it's just taking a little bit of time. So that's a little bit too loose. We're going to tension it down, and of course you want it tensioned so that when you pull the middle of the chain, the drive links don't come clear. Okay, so a properly tensioned chain. Tip from East Coast Lumberjack: when you pull the center of the chain, your drive links underneath there should not come clear of the bar. So this one's properly tensioned, so we start with the back nut first. We're going to tighten it down, and then we're going to tighten this one. So this one won't be quite as crazy as far as pulling goes. It's still, again, theoretically, our hypothesis is it should pull to the right, should come down and curve to the right. Not a ton, because of course we haven't dropped the depth gauges substantially, so it's not going to grab too much wood. So this one here should hopefully run pretty smoothly. So let's put you back over here, and we'll fire it up and cut our next line. All right. Chain number 1. Teeth. Left-handed cutters, cut 40 strokes off on the left. Okay, now, as predicted, we look here on the end. We can see that come down and slope out, which is exactly what we thought would happen. It would come down and go to the right-handed cutters because the right-handed cutters are grabbing more wood. It's pulling more to the right than the left-handed ones. So I started on the left-hand side of the line, hoping that, and it's come quite a ways. It's gone. So that line was, they're all about 1.25 inches apart. So right now, at the bottom, we're 1/4 inch over our line from where we should have been. So now then, I was going to go all the left-handed ones first, but I think what I'll do to prove the point, I think what I'm going to do is put on my right-handed cutters, the one that I filed my right-handed cutters lower, because if I do that right beside it, we should see it go the opposite way. So that's what I think we'll do. We'll do the ones that are side by side, and then we'll be able to see a lot more dramatically what's going on. Now, the other thing I will say is, a bent bar will cause a chain to cut crooked as well, because obviously the bar is not straight. So we know that's a fact. But this bar is straight as a die, brand new. So the only thing that should be affecting what's going on here with us are the chains. So things are going to keep getting hotter all the time here. Not to mention it's about flipping 30 degrees here in New Brunswick today, so it's quite warm even without running a chainsaw. Okay, so that's number 2. So now the next one we're going to use is this one. This has a right-handed cutters, 40 strokes off. So this is done exactly the same as the last one, only on the other side of the chain. So I'll show this to you as well. Put that in my pocket so I don't lose it. So when you look at this one, you'll see that all the right-handed cutters, these ones here, sorry, right there, are about a third as long as these ones. Okay, so the left-handed cutters haven't been touched, the right-handed cutters have, the whole way down the chain. So, same thing, only on the opposite side. So, we will hypothesize, that's just a fancy word for what we think is going to happen. That's the research side of me coming out. So there it is, it's on there now. Slide it in. So as I was saying, what we're going to expect to happen is it's going to pull in the other direction. It's going to pull to the left. There. It's in there. Thankfully, we're putting on new chains, so they're not they're not nearly as hot as the ones coming off. So this is test number 3. The first test we did was actually with a regular chain that's brand spanking new. The first one we did that pulled, and it did pull to the right, as you saw. We can still see through in the background. It had the left-handed cutters cut down. So even though the left-handed cutters are a lot shorter, the right-handed cutters, because they're taller, again, are still pulling out more wood on that side than on the other side, so it should pull in that direction. That needs to be a little bit tighter. Okay, there we go. So now this one is the opposite. It's done the exact opposite with the right-handed cutters taking down 40 strokes. Now we're going to watch, see what this baby does, and it should pull in the other direction. So here we go. So we can tell by the cookie, this was the first side that we came down and it went this way. Look at this side here, it came down not quite as much. Not quite as much as I thought it would. But it did pull a little bit. You can see here on the block. So I was over the line here. I started to the right of the line, comes down and it's cut across the line here, and it's within an inch at the bottom, okay? So 40 strokes, obviously it hasn't taken a lot off of the depth gauges, but it has taken a little. So it's come a little bit this way, a little bit that way, okay? And that's with the teeth down. Now the next 2 chains, if you're saying, well, that's not a lot, Rod. Well, no, it isn't. But guess what? We've got 2 more chains with the depth gauges really taken down. So if you want to see what it's going to look like when they're really taken down, you're about to witness it, because we've got now the left-handed depth gauges down 10 strokes more than the other side. So that's our next chain we're going to put on here, and we'll do the left-handed one first. So I've got this chain here coming up. The left-handed rakers are actually down 14 strokes. That's quite a bit. So it should pull even more aggressively to the right, this one, because it's a left-handed. So let's see now. Sorry. So on this one here, this is a brand new chain, and all I've done, so on the left-handed side, the left-handed cutters, I've taken them down a lot. Okay, 14 strokes. So it should really pull to the left, because the left-handed cutter, remember the left-handed and right-handed cutters are the same length. but the left-handed depth gauges are now down a lot more, so it's biting off a lot more wood. Okay, so because it's biting off a lot more on the left, it should really pull to the left. That's our prediction. So let's see what happens. The longer I talk gives me a little bit more time here to chainsaw and cool down a little bit. So far, pretty much as we expected, but not, it wasn't a lot, okay? It wasn't a real big sweep like we typically see. And I would say that that's because taking 40 strokes off a tooth is only going to lower your depth gauge by about probably 5/1000ths of an inch. So we go from 25 thousandths on one side to 20 thousandths on the other. So we're just going to see a little bit of movement in that 12-inch block of wood. However, chain number 3. This baby here, the left-handed rakers are down a lot, 14 strokes. So it should be down, I would say, another 1/10 of an inch. So that should cause us to see a lot of pulling. Okay. Loosen up our tensioner again. Catch our hole, there we go. And tighten it again. So this one again should pull, and it should pull to the left. And I would predict also, because it's grabbing a lot of wood, it's going to jump a lot in the cut, because this is really hard and dry hardwood. So it's going to be grabbing a lot of that tough wood. We might see some pretty aggressive jumping. Hopefully not too bad. Hopefully it doesn't ruin the whole experiment. Okay, good. So we're the right tension on it. Okay, so here we go again. Back to the block. This is chain number 4. The first one is brand new. The first two, then the next two, chains number 2 and 3, had the teeth on each side cut a little bit shorter, 40 strokes. Now we're going to use a chain that has 14 strokes off the left-handed depth gauges. So our prediction is it's going to pull to the left a fair bit more than the last one. So here we go. We're going to see if that's what happens. Okay, so just as predicted, it grabbed. It was grabbing a lot. So we followed down. It actually followed fairly decent. I probably didn't set it straight, but we came down the line fairly closely. But you look at the bottom here, we're almost touching the line here. You see that? So it came a long ways at the bottom, just like we thought it would. So I will do my next chain on this. I'll come in another line, because I expect it'll come almost to this line on this side. Okay, so everything's going just like clockwork, and we're seeing that when the depth gauge causes a tooth to grab more wood, whatever side that's happening on, it really takes off and goes towards that. So same thing there. So now we're going to do the next chain, which is the right-handed cutter, the right-handed depth gauges, taking down the same amount, 14 strokes. So again, our prediction is, by the time we get to the bottom, it's going to be right over there to the other side, just as hard as this one was. And you'll also notice it's when you get down towards the bottom, it really starts going. And it's like that. Usually you try to set your saw when you know your saw is cutting a little bit crooked. You try to set it so that it's going to go down straight, and then of course it really takes off at the bottom. That's the way it always goes. This one here is a little warm because it worked a little bit harder than the other one. There. That bar cool off just slightly. Hot as blazes. Okay, so this is our next one. Left-handed depth gauges down 10. And it went down 10, not 14, because I used a new flat file, and it was more aggressive cutting. So I didn't have to take as many strokes to get it down as far as the last one was. So these are on I've taken them off the same. They're left-handed cutters. See this? So this one here, this depth gauge is filed off right here. It's on the left-handed cutter. So I thought I had it on the right-handed cutters, but I didn't. Right-handed cutters. So this chain and the last chain are exactly the same. Maybe we'll put it on and see if it does the same thing. We're going to put it on anyhow. The East Coast Lumberjack messed up. And see if it does the same thing. If it pulls to the right just like the last one did. The real test, the last one, our last chain, I filed the teeth down a long ways. And then I also did the depth gauges to match. So it should cut nice and straight, and we're going to test that. So it's the last one to go after this one. And unfortunately, because East Coast Lumberjack messed up, I did the left-handed depth gauges on this chain as well. So it should do the same thing as the last chain. We'll see here in a second. It should cut right down and go to the left because it's taken out a lot more wood on the left-hand side. So it did. Follow the line down just like the last time, and of course it sweeps right in at the bottom here, and it's almost exactly the same. It's about a quarter of an inch left between that and the line. So same thing, and that's what we expected, right? Because it's filed exactly the same. 10 strokes off, but it was of course a more aggressive file, so I didn't take the 14 strokes. So now my last chain, and I have one both done left and right. The last chain has the left-handed cutters 40 strokes off, plus the depth gauges taken down to be exactly where they're supposed to be. So this chain should go back and cut nice and straight the whole way to the bottom. That's what we would expect it to do. So I want to show you that just so you can see here. Look at the teeth, you can see very, very clearly that this here is a left-handed cutter. You can see it's a lot shorter than the right-handed cutter. Left-handed cutter short, right-handed cutter long, left short, right long. So about a third. But I've also, if you look here, you can see the left-handed cutter is filed off, and you also see the depth gauge is taken down as well. On the right hand, it hasn't. The tooth is new, the depth gauge is new. Next tooth back, tooth is a lot shorter, depth gauges have been taken down. So this one, even though the tooth is shorter, the depth gauge has been taken down to match it. So this one here is the ultimate test of whether we can keep. Now the good news for all you loggers, the good news is if this works, this is the tool that matters, the depth gauge tool. And if you have one of these, doesn't matter if you hit a nail or what you do, and one side of your chain gets a lot shorter than the other, as long as you use this and keep all your depth gauges the same height, it'll still cut straight. That's the theory. And we're about to test it. So once we get this one off and the other one on, we're off to the races. And of course, that's good news to the old East Coast Lumberjack, because it means I haven't wasted about 200 bucks here in chain supplies. All I need to do is go back and make sure they all have the same depth gauges, and all these chains will cut great. All right, it's on there again. On the sprocket. Same thing again, we're going to loosen that tensioner so it fits in. There we go. So this should be the last time. Now I did another chain with all the right-handed teeth taken down. And then I also did the right-handed depth gauges to match as well. And we can run it as well if you want. It's an 18-inch chain. I didn't realize that. So, but I do have a brand spanking new 18-inch bar on the old Echo to make sure we can run it as well if you want it. Okay, so that's tension's on. Always tighten the back nut first. I've taught that for I don't know how many years. I've been a chainsaw safety instructor now, directional felling, for since 1986. So what's that? Almost 40 years. What, 37 years? Always tell people to tighten that back nut first. Don't know why. That's what we're told to teach. So that's what we teach. Okay, so we're going to go over to the other side. This has the same straight lines right here. So we're gonna, I might have to adjust you just a smidgen so you can see me. Okay, you can see it there. So here we go. There we go. She was a little loose. Now, you know, you can see very clearly that the left-handed cutters here are a lot shorter than the right-handed cutters. They're about a third. And I've also taken down the depth gauge. You can see right here, there's a left-handed cutter. Okay, there's the depth gauge taken down to match it. This one here is brand new tooth. This one here, same thing. Left-handed cutter a lot shorter, depth gauge taken down. See how straight this is, top to bottom. What do you think of that? Right straight down there, the whole way to the bottom. So it works. It works. It doesn't matter if your teeth are different lengths, as long as your depth gauges are taken down and they're the same on both sides. What matters is how much bite. If one side of your chain is biting more wood than the other, it's going to pull in that direction. So that's what's going on when your chain is cutting down and going to the left or the right. It means your depth gauges are a little bit higher on that side, so it's actually moving to that side of the wood because it's biting off more wood on that side than the other side. Get out your depth gauge tool. Use that depth gauge tool. And some guys, I trained a couple guys here just a while ago, had no idea what a depth gauge was. So, the depth gauge on your tooth is this part right here. That's the depth gauge. It gauges the depth of wood that the cutter cuts. The working corner needs to be sharp. So, as your teeth get different lengths, it doesn't matter as long as you use this. The depth gauge tool. This is an Oregon. You get them all kinds, shapes, sizes, you name it. But you need, if you make sure your depth gauges are all the same height, regardless of how long the tooth is, your chain will cut straight. We've just did an analysis here with 6 brand new chains, all filed with the depth gauges and the teeth a little bit differently, and we saw that yes, it does. It pulls one way and it pulls the other based on how much wood that tooth is taken out based on the depth gauges. But even when we have all the teeth down lower on one side, if we take all the depth gauges down the same amount, that chain will still cut straight. So that's the East Coast Lumberjack. Hopefully we ironed out the age-old debate. Maybe it just sparked a whole lot of new stuff. Who knows? Put your comments down below if you like. Give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. And there's more good stuff coming from the old East Coast Lumberjack.